Hello and welcome to my latest video on my top 1000 countdown. On this video we are going 790 down to 781, so 10 more fighters getting added in. So let's go to the first fighter now, fighter number 790, and it is Paulie Malignaggi, featured on the intro slide. Okay, Paulie Malignaggi beat 4 world champions. He fought 128 rounds against champions, and Malignaggi beat no Hall of Fame fighters. He did fight 23 rounds against Hall of Famers, and in total throughout his career he had 12 fights against rated opponents. He also scored 7 knockouts, never much of a puncher of course, 3 of them in 3 rounds or less and 1 in the first round. Now Paulie was top 10 rated for 5 years. His longest unbeaten run was one of 21 fights in total, and he was never pound for pound rated. He did have 7 fights against pound for pound fighters, scoring 2 wins. He also scored 1 win against a pound for pound top 3 fighter and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 rated fighters. Malignaggi also had an opposition fought rate 2 from 18 and an opposition beat rate 1 from 13. So he had 12 fights against champions. Okay, that included 5 wins with 7 losses, no draws and 1 KO. He had 2 fights against Hall of Famers. They were both defeats. And Malignaggi had 9 fights in terms of world title fights, scoring 5 wins, also suffering 4 losses, no draws with 3 title defences. So Malignaggi, okay, opens up our account. Let us go to fighter 2 of this latest 10. And that fighter is Nana Yor Konadu, okay, from Ghana, Africa, okay, the home of the great Ghanaian Azuma Nelson. So Konadu, okay, beat 6 world champions. He fought 88 rounds against champions, and Konadu beat no Hall of Fame fighters individually. He did fight 12 rounds against a Hall of Famer in his career, and Konadu had a total of 10 fights against rated opponents. Now he scored 32 knockouts, okay, 21 of them in 3 rounds or less and 8 in the first round. He also was top 10 rated for a total of 9 years. Konadu had a longest unbeaten run that stretched to 19 fights, and he was also never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. Now Nana Yor Konadu, okay, had 3 fights against pound for pound fighters, scoring 0 wins. He also scored 0 wins against pound for pound top 3 or pound for pound number 1 rated fighters, and his opposition fought rate is 2 from 18 and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So Konadu had 10 fights against champions, okay, that included 6 wins, 4 losses, no draws with 2 KOs. He had 1 fight against a Hall of Famer that was a defeat, and Konadu had 8 world title fights. That included 4 wins, 4 losses, no draws and 1 title defence. So Nana Yor Konadu, okay, in 789. When we go to fighter number 788, it is Britain's Henry Cooper. Okay, Henry Cooper beat no world champions. He fought a total of 20 rounds against champions, and Henry Cooper defeated no Hall of Fame fighters. He did also fight 20 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now in terms of fights against rated opponents, Henry Cooper comes in with a total of 27 fights overall, a massive tally compared to other fighters down at this level in the rankings, but a small total compared to many to come. Cooper also scored 27 knockouts, 9 of them in 3 rounds or less and 6 in the first round. Now Henry Cooper was top 10 rated as a heavyweight contender for a total of 7 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 9 fights. Now Cooper was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. He did have 4 fights against pound for pounders but scored no wins in the 3 pound for pound categories, and his opposition fought rate was 2 from 18 and his opposition beat rate was 1 from 13. So Henry Cooper had 4 fights against champions. They were all defeats. He also had 4 fights against Hall of Famers and same results, they were defeats, and he had 1 world title fight that was also a defeat. So from 788 we'll go to fighter number 787. It is Akira Yaegashi. Now Akira Yaegashi, a more modern era fighter, beat 4 world champions. He also fought Yaegashi 99 rounds against champions, and he beat no Hall of Fame fighters and also fought 0 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now in terms of fights against rated opponents, Yaegashi had 10 fights in total. He scored 16 knockouts, 10 of them in 3 rounds or less and 3 in the first round. Now, Yagashi was top 10 rated for a total of 7 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his short career was one of 8 fights. Now, Yagashi was pound for pound rated for 1 year in my all-time rankings. He had 2 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 1 win. He also scored 1 win against a pound for pound top 3 fighter, but 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Akira Yagashi's opposition fought rate was 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 1 from 13. So in terms of fights against champions, Yagashi had 11. That included 5 wins, 6 losses, no draws, and 2 knockouts. He had no fights against Hall of Famers up to now in his career. And he had 14 world title fights. Okay, that included 8 wins, 6 losses, 0 draws, and 5 title defences. So there is Akira Yagashi. Our next fighter in 786, okay, is a fighter called Maurizio Pastrana. Now, some people may be a little bit more unfamiliar with Pastrana, but Pastrana beat 4 world champions, okay, he fought just over 100 rounds against champions with a total of 102, and he did beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter, Pastrana. He had a total also of 40 rounds fought against Hall of Famers throughout his career. Now, against rated fighters, Pastrana comes in with a total of 20 fights overall. He scored 24 knockouts, 12 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 1 in the first round. Now, Pastrana was top 10 rated throughout his career for a total of 4 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 23 fights in total. Now, Pastrana was pound for pound rated for 0 years. He did have 4 fights against pound for pound fighters, scoring 1 win, but he scored 0 wins against pound for pound top 3 or pound for pound number 1 rated fighters. Now, Maurizio Pastrana's opposition fought rate is 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So in terms of fights against champions, okay, he had a total of 13. That included 4 wins, 8 losses, 1 draw, with 1 KO. He had 4 fights against Hall of Famers, okay, that included 1 win. He also had 3 defeats with no draws and 0 KOs. And he had a total of 8 world title fights. That included 4 wins, 4 losses, no draws, and 2 title defences. So from 786 we go to 785, okay, and it is Marcos Maidana. Now, Marcos Maidana, okay, defeated 4 world champions. He also fought 100 rounds in his career against champions, and Maidana did beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter, albeit an older one, and he fought 36 rounds against Hall of Famers in his career. Now, Maidana had 10 fights against rated opponents. He scored 31 knockouts, okay, 23 of them in 3 rounds or less, okay, and Maidana also scored 10 first round knockouts. Now, Maidana was top 10 rated for a total of 6 years. The longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 25 fights, and Marcos Maidana was never pound for pound rated in his career. Yeah, big shout out to J Cash the Money Man and Josh Taylor in the chat. So, fights against pound for pounders for Maidana. He had 5 fights in total against pound for pounders, scoring 2 wins. He also scored a win against a former pound for pound top 3 fighter, but 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Maidana's opposition fought rate was 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 1 from 13. So, fights against champions, Maidana had 9. Okay, that included 4 wins, 5 losses, no draws, and 1 knockout. He had 3 fights against Hall of Famers, scoring 1 win and suffering the 2 defeats to Floyd Mayweather, of course, with 0 draws and 0 knockouts. And Maidana had 6 world title fights. That included 2 wins, 4 losses, no draws, and 1 title defence. So Maidana is in 785. When we go to fighter 784, it is a former middleweight to heavyweight fighter, okay, called Nick Burley, who was a bit of a vulnerable puncher, but a good puncher himself, but he could also be vulnerable. Often he'd weigh like just over 160 pounds. He would fight heavyweights, 170, 180, you know, etc., etc. Nick Burley beat 1 world champion, okay, he fought 17 rounds against champions, and he also beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter, fighting a total of 20 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now, as a pre-rating era fighter, Nick Burley had no fights against rated fighters, although that would have been different had ratings been around. He scored a total of 42 knockouts in his career, Nick Burley. 28 of them were in 3 rounds or less, and he also scored 10 first round wins. Now, Burley is a pre-rating era fighter, of course, was never top 10 rated, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 9 fights. Now, Nick Burley himself was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings, but he did have 12 fights against pound-for-pound fighters, scoring 4 wins overall. He never scored a win over a pound-for-pound top 3 fighter, nor a pound-for-pound number 1 fighter. And his opposition 4 rate is 2 from 18, and the opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So in terms of fights against champions, Burley had only 2, scoring 1 win, no loss, 1 draw with 1 knockout. Against Hall of Famers, he had 4 fights. That included 1 win, 2 loss, 1 draw with 1 knockout. Of course, he had the 12 fights against pound-for-pounders. He actually has a tough resume when you look at his resume. Nick Burley had 0 world title fights. So Nick Burley is in 784. We have 3 fighters to go on this current 10. And the first of them is a guy who was known for being very happy. That's a joke. Miguel Happy Lauda. So Miguel Lauda, beat 8 world champions individually. He fought a total of 120 rounds against champions, and Lauda beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter, fighting 12 rounds against a Hall of Famer in his career. Now, against rated fighters, Miguel Lauda comes in with a total of 10 fights. He scored 17 knockouts, 11 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 3 in the first round. Now, Miguel Lauda was top 10 rated himself for a total of 5 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 31 fights. Now, Lauda was pound-for-pound rated for 1 year in my all-time rankings. He had 1 fight against a pound-for-pound fighter, but scored no wins in the 3 pound-for-pound categories, and his opposition fought rate was 1 from 18, and the opposition beat rate was 1 from 13. I'll have a quick drink because it's so hot here. We're having a heat wave. So mouth and throat keep going dry, so I've got to keep sipping. Really, really hot here. So anyway, Miguel Lauda, he had 12 fights against champions. That included 9 wins with 3 losses, no draws, and 1 knockout. He had 1 fight against a Hall of Famer that was a win with 0 KOs. And he had 11 world title fights, Miguel Lauda, scoring 8 wins with 3 losses, no draws, and making 7 title defences. So, Miguel Lauda is in 783. We have 2 fighters to go. The first of them now, fighter number 782, is a former contender called Kid McPartland. Again, some people may not be as familiar with him, but he also had a very tough career. Now, Kid McPartland, beat no world champions. He fought a total of 163 rounds against champions, and he beat no Hall of Fame fighters, but fought 69 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now, Kid McPartland had 0 fights against rated fighters, again pre-rating era, but let me tell you, had he had ratings around at his time, he would have had a whole stack of them. He had no wins against champions or Hall of Famers, but he had a lot of fights against top-level opposition. And I mean, a lot of it top-level opposition. Very tough fighter, very experienced fighter. So he had scored 17 knockouts himself, 7 in 3 rounds or less, and 4 in the first round. Kid McPartland was never top 10 rated, of course, being a pre-rating era fighter, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 17 fights. Now, he was never pound-for-pound rated in my all-time rankings, but in terms of fights against pound-for-pounders, giving you an idea about much of his opposition, there were pound-for-pound fighters, a lot of them. He had 16 fights, which down at this level is an awful lot. He scored 3 wins against pound-for-pounders, but 0 wins against pound-for-pound top 3 or pound-for-pound number 1 rated fighters. And Kid McPartland's opposition fought rate comes in at 3 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So again, just to throw that disclaimer in there in case someone missed it before. Good evening, Martin. Good to see you. The opposition fought rate and beat rate. In my database, I have an opposition score. I've got 2 opposition scores. One is the overall level of opponent faced, and the other is the level of opponent beat. Now, if you look at someone like Floyd Mayweather, his opposition beat rate is the same as his opposition fought rate because he's unbeaten. Same with Joe Calzaghe. When you look at other fighters, they'll have an opposition fought rate, but then the opposition beat rate will be a bit lower. Mouth does keep going dry with this damn heat wave. Another sip. So, basically, the 18, I've quantified it in a way so no one knows what it means, but 18 represents the highest level of opposition any fighter in my database has fought. So 18 represents the highest opposition fought score that any fighter in my database has. So the comparison 3 from 18, Kid McPartland fought opposition to grade of 3. The best fighter in my database, the best fighter for opposition fought to a grade of 18. It's there as a guide. The opposition beat rate is the same. 13 is the highest. Kid McPartland got 1. Other fighters will score more. But just because I haven't mentioned it for a while, so some people may think, what does he mean by that? So basically, it's the highest opposition fought rate and beat rate, and how each fighter on each slide matches against the highest tally in my database to give a reflection of their overall opposition fought and beat. So, there's Kid McPartland. So, in 11 fights against champions, he has no wins, 6 losses, 5 draws with 0 KOs. But he would have had loads of fights against contenders with loads of wins there. He scored some wins against pounders, of course. So, he would have had a lot of decent wins as well. Just not against the champions and Hall of Famers. So, he had 5 fights against Hall of Famers, including no win, 3 loss, 2 draw. And he had 2 world title fights that were defeats. So there's Kid McPartland in 782. The final fighter on this video of 10, okay, is Trevor Berbick. Now, Trevor Berbick, okay, beat 5 world champions. There he is, pictured in the fracas in Caracas. I'll summon names for fights, the fracas in Caracas. Yeah. Trevor Berbick beat 5 world champions. He fought 96 rounds against champions, and he beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter, of course, and he fought 27 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now, Trevor Berbick had 14 fights against rated opponents throughout his career. He scored 33 knockouts, 10 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 3 in the first round. Now, Trevor Berbick was top 10 rated for a total of 7 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 11 fights. Now, Trevor Berbick was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings, okay, but he did have 4 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 2 wins. He also scored 2 wins against former pound for pound top 3 fighters and 1 win against a former pound for pound number 1 fighter. And Trevor Berbick's opposition fought rate comes in at 4 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So Trevor Berbick had 10 fights against champions. That included 5 wins, 5 loss, no draw, so a split record there with 1 knockout. He had 3 fights against Hall of Famers, including 1 win, 2 loss, no draw, and 0 knockouts. And he also had the same record in title fights, 3 overall, including 1 win, 2 loss, no draws, and no title defences. Of course, because the title he would have defended, he lost to the mighty Iron Mike Tyson in a 2-round blowout. So there's my latest video of 10. Okay, coming tomorrow will be 780 to 771. Like I said, we're going a bit beyond 10 videos this time. I'm going to make a little push to get more of the top 1,000 countdown out before I go back to some more career videos. But I'll just go until I catch up on myself, and then we'll jump back to some more career videos. But I am the Boxing Librarian. There is my latest 10 fighters on my countdown. Big shout out to the guys in the chat. And I'm out for now.